Hey everyone, Joshua Kirk here with you once again, and now it's time for episode 264 of Album of the Day, in which for today's album review, I'm going to be reviewing the new album from a California-based hip-hop trio that's really is definitely under the umbrella of underground hip-hop that's very experimental and abstract and oftentimes very abrasive too. And their music also does take on a lot of pretty ambitious concepts too. Of course, I am talking about the trio of Daveed Diggs, William Hudson, and Jonathan Snipes, known by most people as Clipping. I've talked about them a few times on the channel, but this is my first time actually doing a full review of one of their records. I'm reviewing their third studio album, released on October 18th, 2019, on Sub Pop. And the album is called There Existed an Addiction to Blood. And as you can see, I actually got this for Christmas on vinyl. And as you can see, the album cover basically has like 49 nails in it. And it pretty much fits the tone of the record. I'll say why as I go on with this review. And here's the back. And even though there's no track listing on the back, there's 15 tracks on the record, and it's over an hour and 8 minutes. But the vinyl four of the tracks are interludes, and the vinyl version actually does not include any of the interludes on it, so I guess the vinyl would be like over an hour and 3 minutes, probably? I don't know. And it sounds fantastic on vinyl, by the way. There's like this gatefold, and there's the track listing there. Here's one of the vinyl sleeves. It's a double LP, and it's got the liner notes for all songs. Side A, Side B. And here's the other vinyl sleeve. And then there's side C and side D. And there's only one track on side D, and I'll explain why in a little bit. And that's the vinyl packaging for There Existed an Addiction to Blood, the new album from Clipping. So I first fell in love with Clipping back in 2016 off of their sophomore record, Splendor and Misery, which I thought was a very cool kind of sci-fi concept album about an alien known as Cargo 2331. And even though the record was only 37 minutes and a lot of the cuts on it were pretty short, it definitely felt very cinematic and ambitious, but still actually had some very compelling storytelling, some great flows from Daveed Diggs, and also, as usual, impeccable production from Mr. Hudson and Snipes. Most of you probably know Daveed Diggs for being Thomas Jefferson and Marquita Lafayette in the very popular Broadway musical Hamilton, which, by the way, is one of my favorite musicals of all time. But it's kind of crazy how the same guy who is known for being one of the main stars in one of the most celebrated musicals of the last decade also makes this music that is just incredibly disorienting and, is definitely not for, the typical music listener. But if you're looking for something that is very interesting and pushes boundaries and feels like its own world, well then, Clipping and their latest record, There Existed an Addiction to Blood, is certainly your record. They take on a whole different sound on this record, and this time, it's horrorcore. I mean, it makes total sense this record was released on October, 13 days before Halloween, which is kind of funny. I said that given Friday the 13th is, you know, a horror classic, pretty much. I think this is... I think they pulled off the risk very well. I was excited for this record because I thought the teaser tracks were all amazing and likely some of the best songs Clipping have ever written, like Nothing Is Safe, La Mala Ordina, and Blood of the Fang, which was likely my favorite out of all those tracks. Were all fantastic. And I think the whole record, I think, very much is at a similar level of greatness, too. The album opens with this kind of odd intro that features what sounds like David rapping into like what sounds like a McDonald's speaker box, and he's like rapping about, you know, ghosts and bodies and, you know, fire and, you know, gasoline fires and stuff like that. It's a pretty chilling, pretty disorienting way to open the record. Before it eventually transitions into Nothing Is Safe, which features these very tense pianos and synths. Definitely very much reminds me of like John Carpenter's Halloween score a little bit, because the yeah, it's the kind of thing that's like kind of creeps into your brain and kind of fries into it pretty much, and I love it. Meanwhile, David tells the story of a family that seems like they're safe and stuff like that, but it actually turns out to not be safe because, you know, there's this body that flies through the window, and yeah, eventually things, you know, the lyrics actually do remind me of the original Halloween film a little bit too, and also love that very intense chorus where we're getting these huge synths and these kind of skittering trap beats over the pianos that I think sound really killer over the very menacing Nothing Is Safe. Nothing to pray for, nothing to save, nothing to save. The next track, He Dead, is definitely one of my favorite tracks on here. Love the very almost gospel-tinged Ed Balloon feature on the track. I think is great. I think it opens the song up in a way that's certainly very mysterious over the slowly rising bass synths. And then David tells the story of, you know, essentially, you know, there are definitely themes of police brutality in the song, but it's turned even more disturbing when David starts, you know, likening these cops who are doing black people poorly as werewolves that are, you know, out to get them and stuff like that. It's certainly very provocative and has very satirical and definitely only deepens the horror of it that much more. The next track is the interlude Haunting, which sounds like the sample, likely from an old film, of this woman who seems like she's talking to a shrink or something like that, talking about how, you know, she's started hearing and seeing all these weird things that nobody else was noticing, and then sort of finding out that she's been haunted by Satan. And that eventually transitions into La Mala Ordina. And these synths on this track are harrowing as hell. They sound kind of like, you know, I feel like my ears are getting sliced off by chainsaws. Ew. That sounded gross coming out of my mouth. And also love how tense the song is. I think it meshes beautifully with David, along with the features from El Camino and Benny the Butcher. I think really add a lot to the song too. And even though they're a little less menacing than David, it only makes them that much more, I think, that much more sort of strange in the mix. And then the song has this like freaky ass outro where David's last verse eventually, you know, bleeds into these walls of distortion that turn into these like really like disorienting walls of industrial noise. It's like, you know, it sounds even more terrifying on vinyl, and it's definitely one of my favorite points of the record because, you know, it's the kind of moment where just when I think I'm safe, I'm all of a sudden being sucked into a black hole. The next track, Club Down, is likely my favorite track on the record. record definitely reminds me of a Daughter song a little bit because of the very industrial sounds. It definitely sounds like something off their latest album. It sounds kind of like the hip-hop equivalent to a Daughter song, pretty much. And the song, you know, features some really killer bars and really intense flow. And I love the way that the song only gets more and more intense and dreadful, especially as there are these blood-curdling screams in the background from Miss Sarah Bernat. I mean, Spectrum Pulse made a lingua ignota comparison on this track, and I kind of get that too, and that is a compliment, by the way. The next track, Prophecy, sounds to me kind of like a field recording, maybe like bones or something. I'm hearing something I feel like I'm hearing this grinder's wheel, and inside of it are like bones and stuff like that. One of the more underwhelming points on the record, even though I do like how kind of mysterious the idea is. And then we get the track Run For Your Life, which, first off, before I get into the song overall, I just gotta mention, it has one of the most insane ideas I've heard in 2019, and likely in any hip-hop at all, and that is, there are some passing cars on the beat on this track. And while David is rapping, there's these field recordings, and, you know, every, like, 30 seconds or so, you'll hear a car playing a beat, recorded for the song, passing by, and yet it meshes so beautifully with David's rapping. Holy shit! What a great idea here. And I also really like these kind of mysterious lyrics that are about a killer who's kind of, you know, out to get you and stuff like that. But done with this very provocative flow. And then we also get this incredibly animated and kind of sassy feature from Lachette that I think really adds a lot to it as well, over the hypnotic bell-like synths on the track. The next song, The Show, is definitely a gorier track on the record, lyrically. In fact, I'm pretty sure in the beat, I'm pretty sure I heard samples of arms getting sawed off, even. Like, this is kind of like, you know, if there had to be maybe a Saw reboot or something like that, this song would make total sense in it, because it seems as though based on the perspective it's told from, it definitely has a kind of villainous Jigsaw perspective to it that I absolutely love. And also the kind of warbling synths, I think, only add to the terror that much more. A standout cut on the record. There are a couple of lulls after that moment, though. The track Possession, which is a bit of an interlude, sounds like yet another sample from an old film, but this time we get this woman who's, you know, got all these thoughts in her head, and she wants to alleviate herself of them, and I'm pretty sure she's talking to maybe a psychic or something like that, and the psychic tells him to, like, breathe and relax, and then, like, stare at a clock, and then, you know, picture this red cloud and let her just inhale it, like, basically, you know, letting Satan permeate her. But the reason this isn't my favorite track on here is it is a little bit corny, and it kind of feels a little bit goofy, in my opinion, even though I think it adds to the themes of the record very well. And then after that is my least favorite cut on here, and it's All in Your Head. Just not really a big fan of the beat or Counterfeit Madison's kind of hurried ranting, as Anthony Fantano called it, and also David's monotone kind of rapping on here doesn't really do it for me. However, you know, I do like Counterfeit Madison's final verse, and the ending of the track I think is beautiful, with these the gospel-y guest vocals from Robin Hood. I think are great over the kind of epic booming drums. The drums actually remind me of Lingua Ignota's last album, even though I will say this moment is actually more beautiful and less, like, you know, menacing and, you know, kind of demented. The next track, Blood of the Fang, features some great production on it also. Love the kind of dark and sort of subversive samples of, like the sample on here is The Blood of the Thing Part 2 by Sam Wayman, and the way that the blood is like, is kind of worked into the beat, I think is very cool over David, sort of also tackling themes of how brutally black people are sometimes treated, and sort of likening the cops or whatnot to maybe werewolves or vampire, or in this case, I think maybe vampires that are out to get them. Also love the very cartoonish, almost chant-like children's choir samples. It actually kind of reminds me of like the score for the movie Us, like Michael Abel's score for that film. And by the way, that is very much a compliment, and I could totally imagine Clipping and Jordan Peele maybe doing something together. I think that would be a totally epic project, in my opinion. The next track, Story 7, is yet another story song in the pretty extensive catalog of story songs throughout Clipping's discography. I mean, each and every EP or mixtape or album that they've ever put out has a story track on it, and they all kind of have something in common in terms of the theme. The Story 7 we have here is likely one of the most kind of unsettling stories, likely the most unsettling story song the band has ever put together. In fact, I'm not going to really give anything away on the song, I mean, because there's actually quite a few pretty crazy twists that I think only add to the album very well. And I also love how stripped back and kind of subdued the beat is on the track. It's got nothing more than these like skittering hi-hats and likely a bass drum and David rapping on top of it, and yet it is incredibly powerful. The following track, Attunement, goes for more an industrial kind of sound. David is doing this very monotone voiced rapping, but unlike where it didn't really work on All in Your Head, on this track I think the monotone rapping kind of benefits the song a little more. And I also love how kind of fast he raps too. That's a skill that very few people, even back in the day, could really pull off. I also love the layers of noise, these like blaring sirens, and reverbed layers of white noise, and we also get the usage of a psaltery or something like that, which is like this old medieval stringed instrument provided on the song too. That I think sounds really cool, and definitely very much reminds me of how in a horror film score they would sometimes use maybe hammered dulcimer or auto harp or something like that. And also has these layers of organs in it too. I think it's definitely one of the more interesting and definitely one of the riskier cuts on the record. It definitely doesn't sound like anything Clipping has ever done before. The closing track on here is only that much more ambitious. It's an 18-minute sort of outro for the record called Piano Burning. And as the title suggests, this song literally is a piano on fire for like 18 minutes. And throughout the song you can hear parts of the piano either falling down or breaking. And so even if the track is likely the most low-key cut on the record, there still are the, whenever you hear like down, 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 and you hear all the parts of the piano falling down, it's definitely got that jump scare effect to it that I love. it's definitely, it is maybe a little bit excessive and a little longer than I would like. It definitely, at times, can be a little bit, there are points of the track that are a little boring, but for the most part, it is actually a very interesting and kind of subversive way to end the record. And it also is a nice little bit of calm after the storm, because this, this isn't, your superficial, this is just kind of cheesy, kind of horrorcore record. This is an effectively scary record, and it's definitely, if horror is not really your thing, this likely wouldn't be what I would recommend, but for someone like me who, just recently has really become to really love horror films and really the kind of tension they bring, and given how much I wanted a really killer Halloween record last year, the fact that Clipping, gave me what I wanted is like, I can't thank them enough for that. That fantastic record, likely one of my favorite hip-hop records of 2019, definitely in the top 25, great production, great raps, I think the features really add a lot to it as well. There's all kinds of crazy ideas. It's an exciting record from start to finish. Strong 8 out of 10. It could be a 9, maybe without the interludes. In fact, I will say that I actually like the vinyl track list better than the digital one, because it feels a little more cohesive in my opinion. That's just me, but really highly recommend this thing. That's my review for There Existed an Addiction to Blood, the new album from Clipping. I'll see you for episode 265.